Hi again. I hope you're all having a good day. This video is going to be about minor scales. So we have previously talked about major scales, and we've talked about scale degrees, and we've talked about major key signatures, and we're going to start doing all of that for minor now. Minor scales are very similar to major scales in that they have 7 distinct pitches, 1 of each letter name, or another way to say that is 1 on each line or space of the staff. And there's a pattern of whole and half steps that we can use to determine what a minor scale looks like or sounds like. Just like we do with a major scale, only the pattern obviously is different. If it were the same, it would be a major scale. So let's look at that pattern here. I'm going to draw an A minor scale. A minor is the minor key that doesn't have any sharps or flats in it. So I'm going to show you what that looks like. Let's go ahead and work in bass clef to begin. So you'll notice that I started on A, and I went up 1 note on every line or space until I got up to A again, and then I repeat A at the top. If you remember how scale degrees work the same way in minor, so we could label this as scale degrees 1 through 7, and then repeating scale degree 1 again at the top. I'll go ahead and do that and show you what that looks like. Don't forget the little caret above the number. That shows me that it's a scale degree. So notice I can use that label without having to actually write scale degree at any point because the caret tells me that that's what I need. So also notice that when I get back to A at the beginning, or at the end, when I start with A and then I end with A again, I'm not labeling that 8 because we already know that every A is scale degree 1. So I go ahead and start over again with 1. So that's just a little review for you. But the new concept is that this is a minor scale. Let's look at the pattern of whole and half steps in a minor scale. And if you need to, go ahead and pull out a picture of a keyboard and follow along as we go. So A to B is a whole step. B to C is a half step. C to D is a whole step. D to E is a whole step. E to F is a half step. F to G is a whole step. And G back up to A is a whole step. So the pattern for minor scales is whole, half, whole, whole, half, whole, whole. So you can write any minor scale with that knowledge. Start on any note that you want. Make sure you have 1 note representing each letter name, and then make your scale based on the whole and half steps. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's do in treble clef now. Let's do an F minor and see what happens. So to start with, I just drew 1 note on every line or space from F going up to F. And now I'm going to go ahead and add in my accidentals when I need them. So I'm going to see I first need a whole step from F to G. It's already a whole step, so that's good. Then I need a half step from G to A. G to A is a whole step. I need to make that smaller. I need to do something to the A to make that a half step. So what I'm going to do is bring the A down to an A flat. Remember, I can't move the G because I already determined that the G is where it needs to be in the scale. Okay, then if I go from scale degree 3, which is A flat, to scale degree 4, A flat to B is not a whole step. I need to change the B to some other kind of B to make that a whole step. So I'll change the B to a B flat. That gives us a whole step between A flat and B flat. Then I need another whole step from B flat to C. Okay, good. That's already a whole step. I need a half step here between C and D. Well, C to D is a whole step. So to make that a half step, I'll bring the D down to a D flat. D flat to E needs to be a whole step, but it's not. It's too big. It's something we haven't talked about yet, but it's bigger than a whole step. So we need to bring that E down to an E flat. And if I did this correctly, then my last one should also be a whole step. From E flat back to F should be a whole step, and it is. So this is a way that I've gone, I've started with just notes, and I've added accidentals to make this a minor scale. Now I could also do it by starting on F and going up note by note. So I could just start with an F and then say what kind of G do I need, and then go from G and say what kind of A do I need. That's also a perfectly acceptable way to do this. And actually, honestly, probably the way that I usually do it myself. But sometimes it can get confusing because you have to make sure that you write A flat and not G sharp, even though that would be the same note on the piano. So sometimes writing the notes out first can help you. Okay, so that's the basic premise of how a minor scale is built. And like I said, we use scale degree numbers in the same way. This is actually what we call a natural minor scale. There are other types of minor scales that are a little bit different, and I'm going to teach you that in the next video. But for now, it's good to just know that these are natural minor scales. So I'll go ahead and label that just so we remember. Okay, so switching gears a little bit to think about scale degrees a bit. So like I said, scale degree numbers are the same. Remember scale degree names? Those are also the same, except for one. So remember that scale degree 1 is the tonic, scale degree 2 is the supertonic, scale degree 3 is the mediant, scale degree 4 is the subdominant, scale degree 5 is the dominant, scale degree 6 is the subdominant. All of those are the same in major or in minor. It doesn't matter. We can still talk about those using the same label. And if you haven't already memorized those, you probably should very soon because you will need to know those. So it's a good review for that. But scale degree 7 is kind of a special one. So I think we talked a little bit about this before, but in a major scale, you have a half step between scale degree 7 and scale degree 1. For example, if I wrote an F major scale here. One kind of quick way to write an F major scale, now that I know my major key signatures, I can ask myself, what's the key signature for F major? Well, the answer to that is 1 flat, and I know that that 1 flat is going to be B flat. So I can just remember that for an F major scale, I'm going to put a B flat on the B, and every other note will be natural. So I can do it that way, and that actually speeds the process up a bit. I don't have to think about that pattern anymore. So there's my F major scale. I erased that last note because it was a little bit off-centered. I'm actually using kind of tiny staff paper, and I should learn not to do that because it's very difficult to be precise with this. But you may end up with tiny staff paper also. And it's really important to make sure when you're writing your notes that it's very, very clear which note you intend to mean. So if I write my note too big or too small, or I have it off-centered, it might start looking like a different note. And that makes it really difficult for somebody who's reading it to determine what I meant there. So make sure when you're writing by hand that you don't make those mistakes, that you make sure that if it's on a line, the line goes straight through the middle, and if it's on a space, it should not overlap a line at all. That was a little bonus lesson I just threw in there for you. All right, so now we have our F major scale, and we see that between scale degree 7 and scale degree 1 at the top of the scale, there's a half step. So when we have a major scale, we call that scale degree 7, we call it the leading tone because it has this property of leading to tonic. because they're only a half step apart, there's a very, very strong pull from leading tone up to tonic. And this is something that's very characteristic of a major scale and actually really important to the concept of how keys work. So when you learn more about music theory, you learn more about how harmony starts to work and how chords work together, you'll learn that the leading tone is a very important part of that and something that really drives harmony a lot. So that's a really important part of this scale. When we have a natural minor scale, we do not have a leading tone because we have a whole step between scale degree 7 and 1. So whenever there's a whole step there, it's really improper to call it the leading tone because that's not really what it's doing anymore. It doesn't sound the same. It doesn't have the same pull. Like, it still sounds fine to go up to 1, but it doesn't have that necessity to it, that urgency that the leading tone gives us. So when we have scale degree 7 in a minor key and it's a whole step below tonic, we call it the subtonic, just to mean under tonic. Okay, so remember this. If scale degree 7 is a half step below tonic, we call it a leading tone. Because that half step makes it lead to tonic. But if there is a whole step between scale degree 7 and tonic, it's called a subtonic because it does not have the same leading property. So right now we're looking at it between a major scale and a natural minor scale. But the thing you need to remember is not which scale it's a part of as much as you need to remember that it's either a half step or a whole step. If you have a half step between 7 and 1, it's a leading tone. And if you have a whole step between 7 and 1, it's a subtonic. Okay, got that? Excellent. All right, so other than that, all the other scale degree names are the same in major and in minor. Now, for solfege. Solfege is a little bit different. I'm going to show you something. I kind of showed it to you already with the F major versus F minor. Let me show you also below the A. I'm going to write an A major scale in bass clef underneath the A minor scale. Do you remember what the key signature is for A major? Well, I remember that A major has 3 sharps, and those sharps are F sharp, C sharp, and G sharp. So if I write out my A to A scale and then put sharps on F, C, and G, that should work out. Okay, so there you go, F, C, and G. Now if I looked at the pattern here, I would see that the pattern is whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. That would be true. So I won't take the time to show you, but you can think about it on your own if you want. I kind of don't like that last A that I wrote. It looks a little sloppy. Kind of looks like it's taking up too much of the G line, or the G space. That's better. Okay, so let's compare the A major to the A minor scale. You'll see that all of the notes are the same, actually, except for scale degree 3, scale degree 6, and scale degree 7. So if I look at major, and here I have a C sharp, but scale degree 3 in my A minor scale is not a C sharp, it's lower. It's a C natural. That's what we call it if it has no accidental on it. So C sharp here, C natural in minor, that's lower. So scale degree 3 is a half step lower in minor. Let's look at scale degree 6. Here I have an F sharp, here I have an F natural. This is also lower by a half step. So from major to minor, in minor, my scale degree 6 is a half step lower. Scale degree 7 here is a G sharp. In minor, it's a G natural, which is a half step lower. So in minor, my scale degree 7 is a half step lower than in major. So we could say in a minor key, scale degrees 3, 6, and 7 are lower by a half step than they were in a major key. Now, this isn't to be confused with the pattern. You can write it just using the pattern, and you don't have to know anything about major scales at all. But it's important to know how they relate to each other. And whenever we have two scales like this, a major and a minor scale that share tonic, so in other words, they're the same scale name, but one is major and one is minor, so this is A minor, and this is A major. They both have A as scale degree 1. We call those parallel keys. Parallel keys share tonic. So they have different accidentals in them, they have different pattern, but they have the same tonic note. So if I said, what is the parallel key of A major? The answer is A minor is the parallel key. And if I said, what is the parallel minor of F major? You would say F minor is the parallel minor because they share tonic. So if you look at parallel keys, the major scale will always have scale degree 3, 6, and 7 that are different than the minor scale. So you can think about it like the parallel minor of any major key has a lowered 3, lowered 6, and lowered 7 by a half step. So that's kind of how major and minor scales relate to each other. Now, I said I was going to talk about solfege, and this is kind of leading into that. But remember our solfege for major? Let me go ahead and write out another scale, and we can work with this. Let's look at E major. I'm going to use a bass clef again, and I'm going to use a ledger line to start on an E below the staff, because I know that if I start in the middle of the staff, it's going to get pretty high, so I'm going to start lower this time. Now, if I use the pattern of whole and half steps for a major scale to write this, I could think, what's my key signature for E major? And this is how I could check myself. I'd say, well, I know there are 4 sharps in E major: F sharp, C sharp, G sharp, and D sharp. And if I look, I have all of those sharps and no other sharps, so I know I did it correctly. So if I think about the solfege for E major, actually, let me label some of these keys so we don't get too confused. So the first one up here I have is A minor. Notice that for this I use a lowercase a and a lowercase m, and I put that line above the m to clearly show that this is a minor and not major, because m's get confusing. So this is an A minor scale, and beneath it is A major. And then over on the right, we have F minor and F major beneath. Okay, and the one I just wrote is E major. Okay, good. So if we were to put solfege on here, this is just review. We would go do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Okay, let's go ahead and write the E minor scale beneath it. Okay, so now that I have my E minor scale, oh, sorry, I missed something. There we go. There's my E minor scale. So if I compare it again, it's scale degree 3, 6, and 7 that are different. So the other scale degrees, I can use the same solfege for them. So I can have do and re. And then for scale degrees 4 and 5, I can have fa and sol. And of course do at the top again. But I need to show in some way that scale degree 3, scale degree 6, and scale degree 7 are lowered in the minor, in the parallel minor. So if I sang mi, that would be a misrepresentation because mi is that specific third there, that specific scale degree 3. So I'm going to show that mi is lowered and I'm going to give it an A vowel sound. It's actually spelled M-E, but it's pronounced may. So mi changes to may because it's lowered by a half step. La changes to lay because it's lower by a half step. And if you guessed that T might go to te, you would be correct. T becomes te because it's lowered by a half step. So in major we have do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. In a natural minor scale we have do, re, me, fa, sol, la, te, do. So it's important to remember the difference. But it's more than just memorizing that one. That one actually has to do with how it sounds. So when I give you the video that has to do with how minor scales sound, you will be able to hear and also sing the difference there. And the different solfege is often used for singing specifically. So the different solfege actually helps you hit the correct note. At least that's its intent. So that can help you with that. Okay, so we've talked about minor scales. We've talked about a pattern that we can use to construct them. We've talked about the fact that this is specifically a natural minor scale, and we will talk about other types of minor. We talked about parallel keys. Parallel major and minor keys share the same tonic note. And we talked about how scale degree numbers are the same. Scale degree names have one variable. Scale degree 7 can be either a subtonic or a leading tone. And we talked about the different solfege that we use for a natural minor scale as opposed to a major scale. Okay, so that's a lot of information. You might need a little time to digest this one. It's very similar to what we talked about with major scales. Soon we will begin talking about minor key signatures as well, and that's a very similar concept to major key signatures, but just a little bit more to memorize. So make sure you understand this before moving on. And the next video I will show you the 3 types of minor scale, and we'll kind of go from there. All right, have a great one.